SmarterMarkets is back at FIA Boca, and I'm joined by Alan Guarino, Vice Chairman of Korn Ferry and author of The Greatness Code, the formula behind unstoppable success. Great to have you back, Alan.
Thanks, David. It's good to be here again.
So what's been going on at Korn Ferry this past year since we last talked?
Well, it's a hard question to answer. We have 11,000 people in 60 countries. But, there's one common thread. Your last guest was sort of in this sphere. What we do is focus on helping leaders execute their strategy. And that really means how to get their people to perform at an optimal level. And we have all kinds of approaches to do that. And by the way, sometimes, part of our business is recruiting new people. But yeah, that's what we've been up to. And, we've been up to it for more than 50 years, but we just, we get bigger and hopefully better every year.
What do you see as the biggest challenges companies and their leadership are facing right now?
Well, the playing field itself is the challenge. It's been evolving, I would say, over the last 15 years. So because of what I call pace, complexity, and globalization, PCG, the world of work today is a professional sport. And if we think of it in a metaphor of college sports, 15 years ago, work was a Division II sport. So how many athletes can look really good in Division II? A greater percentage than can look really good on a professional field. And so what's happened is that work, because of pace, complexity, and globalization, has become so difficult that companies are screaming for exceptional talent, but exceptional talent's hard to find. And the other thing I talk about is, CEOs don't lead companies anymore. Teams lead companies. Why? Because it's too much for a CEO to do it all as they had done, in previous generations. And that's why we see jobs that are emerging, like chief commercial officer. I love this example. Well, historically, the chief commercial officer was the CEO, right? They were the one that ultimately owned, the overall growth of the business and the commercial alacrity of the business. And then they had a head of sales who went out and did selling work, right? Well, because the CEO has so much to do at such a high, rate of speed, and it's such a complex world, they need a partner who's doing a lot more of that high-level commercial thinking and action. So that's just a great example of how it's actually changed the way work happens.
Yeah. And I feel like a lot of the conversations that we've been having, it's about the pace of change, right? Like last year, everything's discussing artificial intelligence. This year, prediction markets, tokenization. How do you think about leadership or building teams differently when the pace of change just continues to accelerate?
Yeah. Well, I love General Stan McChrystal's work in leadership. He's not part of our company, but our company does a lot of the similar work around this notion of empowering teams. And it sounds cliche, but let me give you an example. When information is happening, when work is happening quickly across a franchise, those individuals across the franchise, this is applicable to larger companies, let's say a couple thousand employees or more, certainly applicable in the 20, 30, 40,000 company. In the previous world, that information was gathered discreetly and it bubbled up to the top and it got through the top and the top processed it and the top made choices and directives and then it came back down. Well, McChrystal talks about the fact that by the time it comes back down, it's obsolete, right? So what happens is teams of teams, right? You have all of these people at this level of the organization in these disparate locations now sharing the information across as opposed to bubbling it up. And so as a result, they're communicating with one another and they're making moves informed by what this group knows, this group and this group has all provided it to this group, and this group is making very fast, smart decisions. So I think that, the notion of business happening more horizontally, not talking about it being horizontal, but truly less hierarchical. And it actually is complete sort of support for what I said earlier, where CEOs just don't have the bandwidth or the aptitude to do all of this as the hierarchical leader at the top. That make sense?
Absolutely. And I was curious, when you talked about business is now a Division 1 sport,
or the pros.
or the pros. What does it take, a listener who wants to play on a pro team in this? What are the skill sets or the mental attitude that's needed to play at that level today?
Well, if people didn't know better, they think you set me up with that one because it goes right to the book. So I wrote Greatness Code, and it was a bold statement in the dedication to take a bit of an edgy tone and say, I wrote the book because it's dedicated to people who work for toxic bosses who suck the oxygen out of the room and get in the way of them achieving their personal greatness. Because, as I said, leadership is hard today. So I do think we have a crisis in leadership. So your question about, well, how does somebody persevere and achieve in today's environment? Well, if they have a great boss, terrific, follow the Greatness Code formula and they'll do really well. And if they don't have the greatest leadership environment, follow the Greatness Code and you'll push through it. So what I tell folks is there's 5 muscles. I call it SCRIP, stamina, courage, resilience, persistence, and passion. Okay, so those 5 muscles developed early career, mid-career, and at peak career will do you well. And some people call it grit, and you'll get this far. And that's fine. The other thing you need, and the other secret sauce, is this thing called social capital. It's the network of people around you who set you straight, the people who talk well about you when you're not in the room and support you in the organization, people who mentor you, and all those other people that help you connect dots that will enable you to achieve the other mile, the last mile of your greatness objective. So if you have both working, the 5 Qs plus social capital, you'll get here. And, Carla Harris, vice chairman at Morgan Stanley, brilliant, wrote at least one book on this topic and talks all the time about the fact that she had a great boss years ago who told her, Carla, you're talented, but your work will not speak for itself. So you need to go out and build a network that will help raise your profile and help have a voice for you so that you can actually achieve your full potential. So again, SCRIP plus SC equals greatness. That's what the book's about.
You may have answered the question I wanted to ask you next, which is for like a young person or someone starting out early in their career, what are the best ways to start developing those aptitudes to get that script?
Right. Well, so that's part 1 of the book, and it starts with early career. The first thing people have to realize is it's a journey, not a sprint. So the cover of the book has a pathway through the woods with a light in the distance, and it's a metaphor for the journey. The pathway is the journey, and it's years, not months. The trees on either side are those people, that social capital around you that keeps you on the trail. And the light in the distance is the greatness objective that you're trying to achieve. So the advice is it's a journey. It's not a sprint. I talk about the notion of failure. Nothing comes without failure along the way, nothing meaningful, no matter how good you are. People aren't conditioned to accept failure. So I tell them to fail forward. And I provide examples of great folks that are revered for their accomplishments. And I show where they failed and how they took that failure and turned it on its head and allowed them to reinvent themselves, reposition themselves, redirect themselves to ultimately achieve the greatness that they were trying to achieve.
Yeah, right. And when you think of, the benefits of failing forward, how do we become more forgiving of the right kind of failure so that people can progress?
Right. That goes to leadership. So in the business environment today, it's going to be impossible to make all the right moves and make low risk decisions and then be right. So the key is organizations that want to move with speed in the face of, outrageous fast evolution of artificial intelligence, for example. We actually have to have a culture that values failure and the lessons learned from it and how we pivot off of the failure to not have fallen down and backwards, but to have fallen forward, taking what we've learned and repositioning that knowledge to get the solution that we obviously got wrong the first time.
And I imagine over the course of your career, you've worked with a number of companies that have gotten it right. And that's kind of the North Star for the companies that want to try this approach. If you think ahead, like if some company says, I want to go down this path, you know, what's the light it can be carrying them to? What can they look to get out of it?
In terms of striving for
And transforming their own company and
sure.
how
Well,
it works.
I mean, at the end of the day, transform or die. So there's a survival instinct that certainly drives it. One, I will tell you that I've been frustrated over the years in finding leaders that are not actually playing to win anymore. They're just playing not to lose. I get it, intellectually, when we look at the difficulty today of making big bets and taking risk to win. And we look at, quite frankly, something as mundane as our compensation models that maybe reward not losing adequately enough that the incentive to try to win isn't there. So there's a whole bunch of forces at play, not the least of which is in a high speed pace, highly complicated, complex global world, which we started the conversation with 10 minutes ago. Boy, it's hard to make big bets and try to win in that environment, right? So you're up against a massive set of challenges that may dissuade you from trying to win. Well, fine, then play really hard not to lose and do the best you can. But I'd rather see people play to win.
Fantastic. Thanks for joining us, Alan. Look forward to reading the book and playing to win.
David, thank you.